It's perspective. Do we want to say you have to be big to survive, or do we want to make a market where the small and the big can survive? And everybody's trying to find a way for there to be a sustainable market.
She was supposed to be solving equations. Instead, she's been saving cannabis companies from financial disaster since 2012. Today's guest is Charlotte Cathro, a CPA who walked straight into the chaos of early medical cannabis and never looked back. Now, as the founder of TAC CPAs, she's the person operators call when the numbers stop making sense. We get into real survival math. How much does a dispensary need to make just to stay alive? How much should you be setting aside for taxes? And what is Charlotte telling clients to do right now before it's too late?
Your primary concern is running a business and making a profit. That's what you are doing. I think you really need to understand your break even and what level of sales you need to be at to cover your expenses and the taxes.
This is Cannabis Finance, real, raw, and built to last.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Cathro. I'm a CPA, certified public accountant, and I work primarily with the cannabis industry. I feel like I found my place and am very happy to be here. But I also feel like I'm auxiliary and a watcher sometimes, and that feels weird.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'd said to you, because we talked about, maybe jumping on the pod, was that I was like, well, I don't really talk to ancillary companies on this pod, right? So it's just like auxiliary, ancillary. The idea is that I'm always trying to talk to people who are license holders and all these other things, although I've made exceptions in the past also. Like I spoke to Eric Casey, for instance, a journalist, right? So it's like, I think this is going to be a valuable conversation for a lot of people out there, though, especially as we dive into the accounting side of things. Accounting stuff, fun, yay. People's best, most favorite subject in high school. So, CPA, is there such a thing as a certified private accountant, or CPA is just it's always public?
Yeah, it's public. There is a certification for people who work in industry. So you can be a private accountant. You can be the controller of a large company.
And that's a separate certificate.
You can or don't need to get that license, but there is a separate certification exam that you can get for private accounting.
Did you always want to be an accountant?
No. I have a very different pathway. I was a math major and I was going to be a math teacher.
I love math.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
But realized when I graduated that actually isn't as applicable as you think it is. And didn't want to build bombs or didn't think I was going to solve some unsolvable theory.
Yeah.
So then I was like, what am I actually going to do with this?
Yeah.
And got a job in accounting. Didn't do the traditional path, had to go back and get a master's degree and sit for the exam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, I always imagine myself as Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. I'm going to solve that math problem.
Oh, yes.
On the chalkboard.
Yes.
And everybody's going to think I'm a genius. This is going to be amazing.
We joke about that all the time at work. We're like, maybe I just need to sleep on it and I'll beautiful mind it tomorrow.
Beautiful mind it.
That's what it is a verb. That's what we refer to it.
Well, because I love math. Math has been a core identity for me for such a long time that I don't hear too many people saying that they were even in math, studying math and stuff like that. So, but you also said that you found your home too. Now, you were a CPA for a long time and found cannabis, or were you a consumer for a long time and then you were like, hey, I think I could kind of apply this here?
Little both. So I was in public accounting for over 10 years, was at a regional firm when cannabis was legalized in Massachusetts for medical purposes in 2012, and had a friend that worked for cannabis attorneys that were doing licensing. And had questions about, the medical market was very strange in Massachusetts. You had to be a nonprofit. You had to be vertically integrated. What does it mean to be a nonprofit? You're not a 501c3. You can't get charitable contributions. Right. How do I get my money out? How do I get investors? What does this mean? That's a lot. That's
a lot. Pretty heavy. Yeah, if you think about it, because I think 503c is going to be I'm donating to the Salvation Army or something like that. I'm going to get a little coupon.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that. I remember that people always talk about the DPH days too. When they think about medical.
Yeah. From the beginning, right? The structure of cannabis in Massachusetts is all based on how we legalized, and it all came from the medical market. And I see other states, and there's a lot of comparisons with states that did it very differently, like Maine. Maine's medical market was so different. It was just like, oh, you're a drug dealer, you're a caregiver now. Wink.
I heard about this. So caregivers in Maine, right? You got to kind of just flip people from the traditional markets in a sense. Yeah. So when I think about those things, I also think about like, because people can be very critical about Massachusetts cannabis all the way from the medical days.
Yeah.
And how it's been challenging all the requirements and stuff to be vertical integration in medical is still just one of those things that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. And I know that one's coming up.
That one's on the docket. Yeah. That is a possibility of breaking that requirement. Also reducing the fee for applying for a medical license as well.
Do you think it should be in line? Because right now it's $10,000 for adult use license, right? Per year.
Yes.
If you have a designation such as we do as a minority, I have an MBE. So that means I get $5,000 every year I get to pay for the privilege of being, to participate in the market. And do you think it should be kind of like in those same things, or should it be still higher? Because it's $50,000 right now.
Do you want my wish list?
I want your wish list. Absolutely. Good Vibes is more than a product. It's your cannabis toolkit. Drop it into your drink, mix it into tea, kick up your mocktail, or just pop it in straight. You can even bake or cook with it. Our unflavored option is perfect for brownies or any recipe where you want control and precision. No more guessing how strong your edibles are. Available in 500 milligram and 1,000 milligram bottles, and flavors like strawberry, grape, blue ras, and our newest, mango guava 1,000 milligrams. Grab your toolkit at dispensaries across Massachusetts or at getgoodfeels.com. And as always, 21 plus only. Please consume responsibly.
I think that any medical user should be able to purchase from any dispensary.
I think so too.
Should be the case.
It's the only thing that's different is that you just hit taxes.
Yes.
Right?
No. Okay. So I saw this on one of your other podcasts where you talked about the medical market and we're like, it's just no tax. No, there is so many reasons. I'm such a big fan of getting your medical license and will continue to have mine forever. I just renewed my medical card. I just renewed my physician's registration or whatnot. It also provides a lot of labor protections, I feel more comfortable traveling with it because right now the TSA has only said medical marijuana is not what they're looking for in your bags. I think there's a lot of reasons to get a medical card and also just to legitimize and be vocal about what you're doing. I don't care if I'm on a list. I want to be on a list. This helps me. And I think, again, it bothers me that as a medical user, I can only go to certain medical stores. It also increases your dosage that you can purchase. And that's a big problem in Massachusetts.
Well, the dosage on a per visit side of things, but monthly, there's still the allocation. How much can you purchase in a month?
Oh, like a lot. I would never hit it on medical. I feel like I also can grow like an enormous number of plants in my yard.
Okay, so wait a second. So you're a medical patient. Do you only go to medical stores?
No.
Yeah, you wish probably.
I wish I could, but like the ones near me as well, the variety is not there. It's hard to find sort of the craft products on the medical menus. I've heard that it's difficult to transfer in metric between what is an adult use product and a medical product.
I wish I knew more about that because as a person who's been in metric before, especially on the product manufacturing side, like I've never had to transfer things to the medical market, but it's just a couple of clicks, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like...
I think it used to be more difficult and more of a pain in the butt. But it's also just, some of the products don't meet the requirements for medical. It's the same stuff, maybe.
Yeah.
That's
happened to me. So our local dispensary over here, Comcan, I recall I was going in there to buy our sleep product, and I had my medical card. So I was like, I'm a medical patient, blah blah blah, and they only had it available in adult use still.
Yeah.
So they went to the back room and they flipped something right there, and they just gave it to me. So talk about customer service. They were like, "Yep, you can have your medical product, right?" So they just did an internal transfer or something like that. I would imagine that was something that was that they did. So going back to, I guess what you just dropped on me, you can grow a lot too. Are you a good grower?
I am starting this year.
Okay.
I have some seeds. I'm spraying them with water and hoping that something happens.
Pop some seeds.
I'm actually a little terrified that I will do it badly and I would be like eternally embarrassed.
Have you grown anything in the past?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have indoor plants and outdoor plants.
Okay. So you have kind of a green thumb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you should be fine.
Right?
I don't have a green thumb, and I'm so bad. Like I'm terrible at growing, which is why I'm a product manufacturer. I'm not a cultivator. Right. From the love of the plant and being in the fields with all these plants, and especially outdoor grows, it's just a remarkable thing. Yes. Just to be on Earth.
Yeah. Never gets old. Never gets old.
I'm in a field of weed. But I just I don't have the ability to grow really great weed. I bet there are systems out there, and there's probably processes I could have followed. I'm sure somebody would be like, hey, here's my SOP, like follow that.
Yes.
I'm sure there's a lot of help out there for people, especially if you're in the industry. I'm sure a lot of people could be like, oh, just do this, this, and this. But this is before I was fully in the market. I stopped growing right around the time that I was kind of entering the market because I was just so busy. I couldn't take care of plants anymore. But I do commend anybody to try it. I actually recommend everybody trying to grow their own because it is an experience, and you'll see kind of like miracle is kind of like a stretch vocabulary wise, but like the amazing properties of this plant and all the different things that can come from this, right? You could have a heavy CBD dominant one, CBG dominant one, especially if because there's like, you can turn off certain things in the plant to generate only CBG and stuff like that in it. And you can, in the way that people breeding these cultivars over years and breeding programs in general and genetics that go into it, it's like the plant can represent so many things.
Yes.
It's not like anything else, really.
I was just having this conversation with a gentleman who I had dinner with and was very into wine and had just been to Napa. And he was like, whoa, there's like strains and different growers grow it differently. And it's like, yeah, it's just like wine. There's cultivars and like where it's planted makes a difference. How the season goes makes a difference. And that's still true inside and outside.
Yeah. Well, that's why
plant.
I think people are trying to tame it in a sense because they want to make that consistent strain.
Yes,
right?
it's impossible. Every single plant is different.
Yeah,
it's like saying, it's like trying to clone a dog, it's
not quite the same.
It's never quite the same.
So, yeah, what do you think about that stuff then? Because then testing gets really hard, obviously. Yeah. I know. So the testing part of this is something that I just had Megan Dobro on from Safetiva, and she was telling me that like just the aggregate, like when you try to homogenize something, like you're pulling it from one part of the plant, another part of the plant, and they could have totally two different results.
Yes.
So people shouldn't be so quick to jump on it's fraud, it's so different. Just because one COA says this and one COA says this doesn't mean that there's fraud involved. It just means that like they probably took it from two different parts of the plant. The thing is, to make it simple. So getting back to maybe some of the bills. So I was on with Ryan Dominguez from the MCC, and we talked about a lot of the different bills. He gave me a little civics lesson, which I always appreciate. But you had a strong opinion about the cap.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? So as a manufacturer, as a brand, and I know I'm going to get hate for a lot of this stuff, of course, because as a brand, I want as many stores as possible for my product to be in. And I know that the stores themselves, obviously, there's a lot of, uncertainty for the future of a lot of these stores because whether they're just scraping by or there's another one popping up like another mile down the road and they already have 3 other competitors in that same space. I understand there's frustrations and concerns around kind of opening up this, cap. But from a brand's perspective, I'm like, yay, more stores, how do I reconcile that? Or how do you see it, I guess?
I think any of the regulations or any proposed changes have positive and negative effects on the industry and the market, and you have to evaluate those, and everybody's opinion is going to come from their own experiences and perspectives. And I'm really torn on it because I know that the market right now is really difficult to survive, and it's very hard for standalone retailer to be successful. But my wish list is that they can be, not that bigger is better. And just to give some perspective, my prior clients before I started in cannabis at the first firm that I worked for was a liquor distributor. And liquor stores, the retail liquor stores, only went from 3 licenses to, I think they're like 7 and they're getting higher, like 10 years ago. So
there was a cap in Massachusetts.
There was a retail cap of 3 liquor licenses in Massachusetts for many
up until
years.
10 years ago.
Up until like 10, 15 years ago, yes.
I had no clue.
You had no clue.
No.
See? And again, it's perspective. Do we want to say you have to be big to survive, or do we want to make a market where the small and the big can survive?
Right.
Because I want a market where the small and the big can survive.
Right.
I want the mom and pop stores. I want those to be able to exist. And everybody's trying to find a way for there to be a sustainable market. And, I think there's other factors that we can get at first and maybe give people a little bit more lead time to, to get to the point where we can increase those licenses without it really hurting small operators.
And you think it's just too early?
I think it's too early for that to happen. I think it's going to hurt small operators. It does now. Those that have buying power and are vertically integrated and have their 3 stores, it is hard for that. It's hard for the smaller operator to compete with that purchasing power and get discounts.
Well, I've heard there are some groups out there that have been putting together like buyers clubs and stuff like that.
That was something that I've talked about for a little while of, can we not have, these 3 single retail stores maybe buy together? There's no reason that you can't do that.
Yeah, and if from a Fred's perspective, it's great for us too, because we're just like, we have 3 new customers now, and that's and sure, we'll give you a bulk discount at that point, right? Because we tier things up, of course, because we want to make sure that, for us to put together like a small order, it's the same amount to put together a big order to us. So for us, it's more like if you're putting together a big order, you definitely should get a discount on top of that, right? So yeah, if there's a buyers club out there and they represent 3, 4, 5 stores, I've heard of buyers clubs. I know I probably shouldn't mention too many names, but like I knew of a group that was like probably like 9 or 10 of them. They were trying to go in together. I don't know what happened to it, but that buying power, I think, will help manufacturers also, because then they're in the consistent revenue part of it as well, because those 10 stores are continue to buy from you, month over month. So I do like that. I don't know how it's going to play out because I haven't really heard too much come from that still. It's been a while since I've heard buyers clubs come up again, but it is one of those things that potentially could help, tremendously with the smaller operators.
And I think the other argument that has been made for increasing the license cap is that the hope that it would increase, investment or open up some buyers.
I've heard that
argument. And I don't think that that's the reason that we don't have investment in buyers right now. I think we had a market fall out from underneath us. I think there's a lot of not profitable stores that maybe went a little too big, spent too much on the build out, got some predatory lending. They're trying to get out from underneath. They paid the green tax on their rent and their legal fees. And now the time to ask for money is not when you need it. That's just how it works. And now all of the larger operators either have their 3 licenses in Massachusetts, or frankly, they've backed out of Massachusetts. Trulieve has left. They're gone. Forefront's about to leave. Like, it's not happening here. They're all looking at New York and New Jersey. Those markets opening up killed Massachusetts. That money is gone. It's not here.
All the investment dollars went to, I remember even just last year, but it was like, oh, New Jersey. And then all the money was shifting to New Jersey. And then New York got their act together. Like, okay, New York's now back on. So I definitely get that. I definitely get that point. I don't know if investors are ever going to come back to Massachusetts. That is an open question in my head also, because we're a small team. I mean, we're like 11 people, right? So we're one of the smallest teams probably out there. And in one of the smallest facilities out there with 1,800 square feet, and 800 of it is production. You know what I mean? So, and 600 or so is vault. So the way I look at it though is the small operators, small or big, they potentially are also under extreme potential pressures from either their investors or debt holders. And so they made, like Forefront, that just came out, right? So I was just like, what was that all about? I didn't dig into the details. Did you know like what behind why they're pulling out?
I mean, I think that this just happens to MSOs. They have no access to bankruptcy markets, so they go into receivership and their debt becomes bigger than their revenue, and they make things too big. And
Now, the debt holders get paid first still in this case? Or is there no...
that's like what receivership is meant to do. It's meant to be like, this person gets this much and who gets paid
Well,
first
because I remember there's a story, and this is what... Because people keep on saying like, oh, there's no such thing as bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
But people go into receivership.
Right.
And so when I think about that, I think to myself, well, this one store owes us, $10,000, we'll say, right? I'm just making up numbers. And they go out of business. Am I a debt holder at that point? They owe us. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So where do we fall on that? And if they go into receivership, where do we fall? Are we at the top? Are we at the bottom? Somewhere in the middle? Like,
I think it all depends. Again, like that, the receivership process is similar to bankruptcy at deciding basically who gets paid and who gets what on what dollar. My wonderful employee, Kelly, came up with a really funny analogy for that, which is like Britney Spears' conservatorship. That's what she thinks of when she thinks of receivership.
Okay.
Like somebody has to be responsible for your financial business.
Right. Exactly.
It's like your dad's going to come in and take care of, your affairs and decide
Because
responsible.
Because I think it's so, like, when I think of bankruptcy, I think of like a formal process, but maybe I'm thinking too.
Receivership is it's a formal process. It's just done by the state.
Okay. But sometimes I feel like, well, I'm still not getting paid for that $10,000.
Oh, 100%. Nobody's walking away probably with 100%.
Well, no, of course.
You know what I
But even like 10% of it,
Yeah.
it seems like I don't know if we're going to get any of that back because someone else is getting paid first, which to me, equity holders should be the last ones getting paid.
They should be.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, well, but your investors are demanding that they get as much out probably as possible also. So that's why I think of receivership is at a formal enough process that really does put debt holders above equity holders, because at that point, I want to make sure that we're going to get our dollars. Either way, long story short, I've sent a few people to small claims at this point.
Yeah.
It is just the nature of kind of the business that we're in. But getting back to the small business side of it, all the people, or small or large, the debt, the predatory lending and stuff like that, because we get thrown stuff all the time at us. I get 3 texts a day about like, hey, because I got a UCC1 filed against me, not against me, but the company, because we took out I think we're working with Lendica. So Lendica is a platform which is basically almost like a merchant cash advance at that point.
Yeah.
And so they own all of your future revenues basically until they're made whole. And so, but they file a UCC1 with the state. And I'd never heard that term before. But until somebody texted me like, hey, you want to, refinance you want to get off the UCC1 list? We can get you off the list. I'm like, I'm on a list somewhere? Like, I didn't know.
That's super interesting, because do they know they're in the business of selling cannabis?
Well, Lendica?
Yeah.
Yeah,
have
Lendica.
direct rights to your dollar of revenue like that.
Yeah, no, they're actually, so Lendica is one of the companies, one of the reasons why I went with them was because they offered an okay terms. It was like, there was I want to say, 1% origination fee and 2% per month. No, per month. Per 4 weeks. It's higher though, because it's 26.
Yes.
It's every 4 weeks. But the point being, and plus the 1% origination. So, but it was the only thing we had available to us.
Right. That's
and so we were like,
it's the only thing of it. It's like,
and so if we wanted to like pay cash for distillate, because we were getting a great price on it, and they wanted COD, and they weren't going to release it until we paid them any money, I was like, call Lendica, let's cut them an $8,000 check or whatever it is for that kilo, or 2 kilos at that point. But I didn't know what a UCC1 was until somebody had texted me who was trying to get my business the same way. So once I got on that list, all of a sudden I'm getting 3 texts a day about like, hey, you're a merchant cash advance. Like, we can refund it. And I'm just like, I don't have a merchant cash advance. And I'm like, maybe I do. Like, I'm not sure, Yeah. And so as a small business, a lot of this stuff is new to me even. And I've run businesses before.
right.
So when I think about people who have no business experience, potentially, they come into the market brand new, with
Yes.
the green rush. With doe eyes, and they're coming in like, we're gonna win, we're gonna succeed, we've got the best products, and we've got the best, we got a master grower who's been growing in his basement for 20 years.
In Colorado.
In Colorado, right. In the Triangle. So I think of all those people who are coming in, and it definitely has slowed down a lot. If you look at the agendas over the last few months, there's been like 1 or 2 retailers occasionally popping up kind of thing. So it's definitely slowed down a lot on the retailer side specifically. Actually, on all license types, I think about these predatory loans. I think about all these people who are getting taken advantage of. Yes. And then they're like, well, it has to succeed. I refinanced my home. I took money out of my 401k. I did, I took all the money out of my bank account basically and went credit card debt to be able to get this store launched, knowing that I'm going to get the money back when I finally launch. They finally launch, and now they got to make payroll. They got to pay their rent. They got to do and you got to pay for the product, right? Which I'm on that side of it where I'm just like, oh, you got to pay for your product. You sold it already. And then I think to myself, they're going to go back to that pool and be like, well, what else can I get for funding? And then they're going to find lenders that are willing to give them 30% APR, It gets too usury at that point, basically. But they do it a crafty way, of course, which is more like a merchant cash advance way. So I could easily see people falling into that trap of getting their skis way in front of them. And it feels awful. Like, I don't like that. That's just an awful, icky feeling. But I don't think there's really any other way.
Yeah.
Outside of just like being fiscally responsible from day one, ultimately.
Right.
There's some people who have done that successfully.
Yes.
And they've just been like super tight, super lean.
Yeah.
Going to Facebook Marketplace and buying stuff, not necessarily buying something fancy and brand new that you saw at a conference.
Yeah.
Some crazy pre-roll machine that does like 100,000 pre-rolls an hour. And it's like, it's like $500,000. And you're like, yeah, let's get it because we're going to sell a ton of these things. I've been victim of that. 100%.
Yeah.
Even though
there's a new shiny problem for sure.
100%. And so, like, when you think about, since you've seen so much, like, what are you advising people now? Are people still coming to you and be like, hey, I'm trying to get licensed. Like, how do I start?
A little bit. And
it's a trickle a little bit now. Yeah.
Breaks my heart sometimes, talk about the...
Do you dissuade them immediately? Like, don't even...
Well, I had one maybe 2 weeks ago that was a social equity applicant that was going for a micro business outdoor grow and wanted to be organic about the plant, no remediation.
Yep. My heart's in that. I love it.
I love it too, but oh my God, this is not the market for you. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Like, this is not like it. I don't know where to make that work.
Yeah.
Right now.
Where does that fit into the ecosystem?
Where does that fit right now with the testing requirements and with the New England weather? And, I really want outdoor growing to be a thing in Massachusetts that is profitable and great. And there's an indoor and an outdoor grow. Like, there's room for everybody here. I want there to be room for everybody here.
I think there's like 7 outdoor, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around that number. It's not that many, I know, but like, there's a good handful,
It's just really, really hard. It's really hard work.
Without the remediation, because the big issue with testing requirements for outdoor is the microbials. And the microbials, as far as the outdoor cultivators are concerned, they're not being calculated in a favorable way for them.
Correct.
So therefore, they have to go to a remediation.
Right.
In other words, they have to do one of the dozen tactics you can do to remediate flower, and then taking that flower and then putting it out to the market. And then right now, there's no way, you don't have to indicate on the packaging, at least, that it's been remediated, right?
So correct, right now.
And so, yeah, I think it's a system that has been built that has the infrastructure, the regulations, the compliance along with the whole thing is so complicated sometimes. It takes a math major to be able to figure, like, just to piece these things together to be like, this is not the right time for you to come into this market.
But I also don't want to gatekeep. I want there to be a place for you in this market, but I want you to be realistic and I don't want you to be promised things. They told me that they were working with a consultant that was helping them with the licensing, that I'm sure is taking a pretty penny and telling them that it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Look at this $1 billion industry. I mean, people still are talking about dollar signs as if it's this huge, if you grow it, it'll just fly off the shelves. And that's not the case.
No, it's not.
And, you talked about the testing requirements. I told you I was popping seeds. Like, I will smoke that I growed in my backyard, and I have I'm not going to test it and see if it has microbials in it. I'm going to smoke it and I'm going to enjoy it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and you're going to be growing outdoors, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. So I mean, I totally get it, and it's not like there were test results back in the traditional days.
No,
so it's
vacuum that stuff off the bottom of your carpet.
Exactly.
Like, come on, don't be all haughty-taughty now.
Right. Like, but public safety,
yes, no,
right?
of course. And as a medical user, obviously, I want to know.
Testing,
it is better informed. But then the testing requirements also need to be based in science. I'm not sure they are. Do we know what's safe? Like, I ask Megan all the time. Poor Megan. Here's my question.
She gets a lot of the questions.
I'm just like, what are you smoking? I'm going to smoke that.
Exactly. Well, I think that's what it comes down to because of all the testing, testing hoopla, some people go so far to call it fraud, and lab results and stuff like that. It's hard to trust like what you're smoking sometimes.
Yeah.
Because now, and that's, I think, the worst thing for the CCC.
I think it is much worse that people are just trying to get things to pass testing, and then they're doing things like remediation, which I don't know if it makes it bad. They X-ray our tomatoes in the grocery store or something. I don't know.
Right. But you're a consumer. You're a medical patient. You're a consumer who happens to be also in the industry.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be your job to figure all that out.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And that's where I think if the CCC loses trust,
yes,
the consumer loses trust in the process, they're just going to go back to their plug.
Right.
So it's like, well, I thought I was getting tested weed, but then all of a sudden these reports come out and the trust has been decreased or diminished. So is there a bill for the microbials also?
I think there is a bill on the testing that increases the total yeast and mold.
Yeah, it's something specific like that. That just it's a
threshold that is increased.
So outdoor should hopefully get closer.
Yeah, it might
do without having to go through crazy.
I think there's also a push by the CCC to make it more clear when things have been remediated. I think that's coming.
And I know they do obviously look outside of just Massachusetts. They said that when I had Executive Director Ahern on, he had said that there's a working group for all the different regulators across the country. They all talk amongst themselves about all this.
I'm sure they do.
So they all try to at least educate themselves on like what other states are doing.
Yeah.
Hopefully becoming more informed about like...
I hope they do.
Right, exactly.
Can I add to my wish list?
Yes. This episode is brought to you by Good Feels, makers of Good Vibes, the fast-acting tincture that actually delivers. Whether you're into classic flavors like grape, blue raz, or strawberry, or want to try our brand new 1,000 milligram mango guava, we've got a vibe for every taste. Just pop it into your drink and feel it kick in fast. None of the wait, all the feels. Available now in 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams bottles across Massachusetts dispensaries or at getgoodfeels.com. As always, 21 plus only, and please consume responsibly.
Nobody's talking about decreasing the marijuana retail tax. Why aren't we talking about decreasing the marijuana retail tax?
You mean excise tax put on top of the sales tax?
That is worse than 280, my friends. That is worse.
There's sales tax. There's the excise tax, then there's the local tax.
Correct.
The local tax being 3%, up to 3%. You don't have to charge it if you're at the town, but
everybody's opting into
everybody's going to maximize that, obviously. Because I've also talked to town administrators, who Travis Ahern was a town administrator, who I've worked with actually in Holliston. And, I've heard from other town administrators who were like, this is a bait and switch. Like, you guys thought we were paying 3% impact fees.
Confused about because they paid 3% for both. So they were like, is this, and people in the licensing process weren't sure. They were putting it in their portfolio, like putting in their pro formas as 3% tax, but there's two of them.
There's 3%.
And one of them is up to, by the way, and it is based on your impact, of which there's none, if not a positive impact.
Right. So,
I wish we could get 3% because we are benefiting the town that we're in.
Exactly. So we should be getting the money.
Yeah.
So totally agree on that one. So, but I think that's the thing that
why do we have a punitive tax? The world has not ended.
Right.
Where's that money going? Yeah. Like, come on. And right now there's a big fight in California because it's by statute going to increase to 19%.
I know.
And that has got to stop. Has got to stop. But that's still 19% lower than 20%.
Right.
Like Massachusetts already has that.
Right.
The way to make it not a struggling market, like that's the ceiling. The retail the price to the consumer, which includes sales tax, is our ceiling. That floats down to the cultivator. That floats down to everybody. So that would make a huge difference.
Yeah.
If my consumer has $60 to spend, that means that 50 of it is going to me.
Yeah.
And the reality of this market, of this economy, is that there is a fixed amount in the pockets, right?
Absolutely.
We talked about the alcohol industry. There's a huge joke that, when times are bad, alcohol does better. And I think that's probably true of cannabis as well. But the alcohol industry has had 100 years ahead of us to make that place in the consumer's pocket.
Yeah.
I do think that cannabis is a consumer product in that sense, and people will spend less on it.
They'll spend less, but do you think? So you're saying it is recession proof or not?
I don't think that.
I don't think it's recession proof. Interesting. I've not heard that perspective before. Because I always go.
But maybe I'll start growing in my yard, and that's the recession proofness.
Exactly. So I'll still get
I'm not
medicine.
making bathtub gin.
Well, exactly. I'm not going to get a still.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So all right. Going slightly back to the accounting side of things. So you had somebody come by 2 weeks ago. In the early days, are you still advising people the same way you advised people in the past? In other words, were you still saying to people, 2 years ago, say, yep, you should be fiscally responsible, take all this, don't overpromise, like all this other stuff.
Yeah. I've always been the bad guy, Jason. I've always been the one saying, cool pro forma. What happens if the cost per pound drops to $500? Because you need to plan for that, and not, it's always going to get better. It's at some point, it's not.
Yeah, consumers are going to always pay more every year.
True.
They're always going to be looking
and for you should not plan to sell every pound that you grow. Like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I've always been the Debbie Downer of okay, dial it back 7 times.
Tell the cultivators. So actually, really quickly, because I'm always asking cultivators, because, we try to get creative here. And I asked a couple of cultivators this already. I was like, hey, can we just lease some of your space to grow just trim material for distillate? Like something like nobody's going to smoke it, and we're just going to turn all this into distillate. And they're like, oh, our canopies are full. And I'm like, okay, great. But nobody has excess capacity around.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But going back to kind of the frugality side of this, or not the frugality, but how you approach business, or how you approach businesses as their accountant or their advisor in that sense. You've always been that fiscally responsible person from day one. Have people always taken that advice?
No, definitely not. No, they are just like, we're going to go for the biggest tier and we're going to grow so much. Yeah. And the problem is, and I think this is potentially the problem with people not having capacity. And it's one of the problems that I think has plagued, the potential for the co-op model, is it's really hard to share, and whatever enters your facility is a potential entry point for something bad. So you have to have control over every single plant that's in here. Because if that guy leased some space in our facility and he gets powdery mildew, everybody gets powdery mildew. So it's really hard to isolate. And so I think that's part of the reason. And then I think that, the people who are doing that level of scale did so intentionally. There are people who went right for, I'm going to grow for biomass, and, I'm just going to grow a lot. It's not everybody is supposed to choose their market differentiator, their value proposition. Not everybody's trying to be craft, and that's okay. I think what's difficult is we don't have the benefit of years of this shaking out.
Right. Well, now we're starting to be a little bit more, having a little more wisdom as we approach different, as new license holders come online.
Right.
Hopefully they seek out advice from people who have been in it for a while and get actual real advice.
Yeah.
As opposed to just hearing from a consultant oh yeah, you should totally do this because you're paying me. So I'm going to tell you all the great news. Yes. But I'm going to go back to those early days though. So when was the first license that you brought on the adult use side?
On the adult use side.
Or not, you don't have to name it, but tell me, maybe walk me through that experience.
Well, I had medical clients, so they would have been the first to get.
Oh, they were converting to adult use, right.
Which is really interesting because they had to go from this weird at that point, they were able to convert from a nonprofit to a for-profit. And that was an interesting proposition because that is not a, like suddenly you have equity. That potentially is a taxable event.
Right.
So that is problematic.
Right, exactly.
And I don't think people, everyone wants to do it, but you may end up with a huge tax burden because of that.
Yeah, that's the wild thing. Like all these conversions and stuff like that, there might be a taxable event, which means all of a sudden you have $100 million in new revenue or income, I should say. And then you get taxed on it. You're like, well, I didn't make that money. It's just because I converted something. So you got to do it the right way. Do you rely on consultants yourself? If like you must have a partnership with like an attorney or two or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't need to be everything for everyone. And I think that that's a really important thing for any business to establish, like, this is where I help people and this is not where I help people, and find those people, to surround yourself with that can fix that need. Like, I am not an international tax expert. That is not my thing. I will refer you to somebody else. And I know those people.
Well, I think that's what a lot of, especially small startups, they're like, oh, Charlotte, you can do all these things, right?
Yeah, no. And I think it's a misconception about certain service providers. I think lawyers get it a lot. Like, there are real estate lawyers and there are litigation attorneys and there are business attorneys and there are cannabis license attorneys. Like, those are all different people generally. Right. If you go to one of the big firms, they might have all of those on staff. But I think it's really important to know your limits and when you aren't the best person for the job. It's really important for you to know that.
And so again, going back to the accounting side though, did you, when those first pure adult use people, maybe not the ones you were converting from medical to adult use, the first adult use, I'm sure they had big wide open eyes being like, let's go, we're ready. Was it 2018, 2019 maybe?
Yeah, probably around 2018.
And during that time, you were still probably, saying fiscal responsibility, make sure you can cash flow it and stuff like that. But like, I'm sure even back then though, you must have been like, yeah, sure, you can make that purchase. Yeah. 100%. Like, what were some egregious things that maybe like a pre-roll machine, like $500,000?
Oh, a lot of machines that don't get used.
Equipment.
So much equipment.
I've felt much
equipment. Yeah. And larger facilities and
too much space.
Really, construction is just unbelievably expensive. And, fancy designs of retail stores where all glass everything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, back then it was like Apple Store. Everybody would be in the Apple Store, right?
Yes, we don't want an Apple. We have an Apple Store. We don't need another one.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people who tried to differentiate in the same way.
Right, exactly.
And didn't think about the consumer. I think one of the hardest things about the cannabis industry is that we generally have an uneducated consumer. And I think that that's what I mean by the benefit of time. I think our consumer is going to catch up because, again, 15 years ago, well, more than that, 20 years ago, we were scraping stuff off of our carpets and smoking it. And now we have all this availability and opportunity. And so people go into a store and the menu is just overwhelming and there's not enough information. And the consumer doesn't know the difference. Like, imagine if you walked into a liquor store and there was all this variety, but you didn't know the difference between Bud Light and Pappy Van Winkle. Like, that hadn't been established yet. That's what cannabis companies need to do, is tell the consumer, this is where I am in the value proposition. This is what you are guaranteed from me. This is what I'm providing you as a value.
Yeah, because I think about that a lot, because I think to myself, like, we talk about like TAC hunters.
Yeah.
They just want the highest THC. Right. That's a default for them. That's just like, they don't know.
There's the equivalent of that in alcohol. It's the people who go into a store and buy based on the label. Like, that's funny. That's a funny name. It's called Fat Bastard and it has a pig on it.
Right.
People buy wine for that because they don't know about wine. Or they buy, people go in and they go for a strain. Like, people go for Merlot. There's a variety of stuff. People kind of do veer towards what they know, and it's just establishing that knowledge base for them. And right now it's like too much choice.
Right. Well, I mean, but we're also talking about people, small businesses who are craft and stuff like that want to provide all these options for people. Yeah. But I think they get stuck in they get stuck in a place where it's the consumer is only wanting high THC. So you're 16, 18%,
Right.
Balanced with CBD and CBG or whatever can go hit the curb because we only want something 30% plus. Now, obviously not all dispensers are like that but it is driven through the consumer in that perspective as well. And I feel like, because I hear consumer education all the time.
Yeah.
That is probably the number one thing that people say, this is going to solve everything. We just educate consumers.
Right.
Educating consumers is extremely expensive.
It is.
To be out there talking to people and educating them, or it takes time.
Yeah.
Right. And we do our best.
Right.
We have brand ambassadors. We have a field marketing team. We have tons of marketing. We do a bunch of social media. Some of our social media is goofy, of course, but sometimes we are trying to educate people as well. And I feel like we're so close to the industry that it's easy for us to be like, well, consumers need to be educated. But then if you talk to an average consumer, sometimes they're like, yeah, I just go for the highest THC.
Right.
I've had so many conversations with consumers and they're kind of just like, yeah, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Like, I just want something that gets me high.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm high, indica, I'm high. Sativa, I'm high.
Yeah.
Hybrid, I'm high. That's all I care about.
Right.
So I like the consumer education component because I love educating in general. Education is like a core thing that I believe in with my company, especially. I'm always trying to teach people new things every day. Every time I talk to somebody in my company, I'm always trying to be like, hey, did you hear about this? Like, I always try to like bring them up to speed with everything. But knowing that it costs so much money to educate people, and even the staff we employ to get out to the field is so expensive. I sometimes feel like as a brand, there's like no ROI on that.
No. Right.
It's like, how do I justify?
You're so far removed. You have a hard time.
Well, I'm not a dispensary either.
Yeah.
Right.
If you do a pop-up or something, if you have your people out in the field talking to people, then it's easier for you. But you don't have, that bud tender is not your employee.
Right.
So how do you make sure that they are informing, like, how do you educate them? It's not your job. Right. Exactly. And so it's like the first line of defense is beyond our control. And I think that that's really hard.
It's frustrating because that also is, we use platforms like Little Alerts, for instance, that will give us the, approximations of what's actually happening in these stores and dollar values and in units. But there's no way to know for sure because we don't own the front end point of sale. So we don't actually know what's going on in these stores unless we actually go there and visit them.
And I think people are making assumptions that are wrong.
100%.
We made Alexander on, and he said most of the people that are, a higher percentage was women that were getting delivery. I talked to Maura from Pioneer Cannabis, and she said, the people who are buying the little packets, the like Zyn packets, more women than men. And you would not expect that.
That's
you would not expect that. So I think it's also, we need to be educated about what our product is doing and who is using it and who's our consumer, because it might be surprising as well. And I think, there are the TAC hunters, but I also think that there's the medical consumer, or whether they're licensed or not medical consumer, that is just looking for stress relief or pain relief. And that's not necessarily a TAC thing. That's not what they should be looking for.
So you brought up an interesting couple points, especially around the kind of like talking to consumers. It's one of the things that we always encourage, and something we do internally. So for instance, this is a year ago probably, when we were just launching Good Vibes, or Good Vibes was just in the market. We're trying to figure out if we had the right product market fit. I was offering money. I was paying consumers to come and just talk to me for like 20 minutes, right? So it was like $20 for 20 minutes. Just like, talk to me. Like, let's just talk about like the products. And I had a list of like 8 to 10 questions. And it was really easy to just peel them off. But I felt like I had to pay them something because it was like I was taking up their time. Mm-hmm. And some of the insights there were just, you couldn't get anywhere else. Because I actually was talking to our real consumer.
Yeah.
And so we were asking them about like artificial flavors versus natural flavors. And they're like, I don't care. And I'm like, because we were thinking about like changing it to be all natural and all this other stuff, or bring out a separate line that's all natural. And they're like, yeah, like we literally killed a whole program because they were like, it didn't matter to me. It didn't matter to 99% of the people I spoke to. So going again, I always like to go back to the accounting side.
Yeah, it is what I do.
Yeah. What are you recommending? Like, if you were starting over again today, any license holder that's coming to you today, should they be prepared? What should they be thinking about?
I think you really need to understand your break even and what level of sales you need to be at to cover your expenses and the taxes.
Well, I think there's a lot of hidden stuff.
I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah, I don't think they do.
And when we do cost accounting projects, and I'm not, selling it for the tax reporting. Obviously, you need cost accounting in this market, because of 280E and because you're a manufacturer.
Break down cost accounting really quick.
Sure. Cost accounting would be determining the cost of inventory that when sold becomes cost of goods sold. And because 280E limits you to your gross profit, limits your deductions to cost of goods sold so that you are taxed on gross profit, it's really important to know what you can put in there, what you can't.
Right.
It is also not a tax thing that any manufacturer, if you make something, you should know the cost of your product.
Right, exactly.
And know your break-even point and know what goes into it and what doesn't and what's fixed and what's variable. Knowing those factors helps you to make decisions. I was a former educator. I taught cost accounting. I taught accounting. The basic principle of accounting is that accounting provides information to make decisions, for managers to make decisions. That's the point. It's not just for taxes. That's like a compliance thing. And I know that that's like a secondary purpose. So I have clients ask me like, what should our chart of accounts look like? What should our COGS look like? And it's like, those are for you. That's for you to make decisions. So you tell me what you need to be able to see and, how you want to categorize things and how you want to, look at them, what level of detail is important to you. And that's how you should set up your financial statements. That's your primary role. Your primary concern is running a business and making a profit. That's what you are doing.
Right.
Taxes are secondary. They're compliance.
I think a lot of people confound those two things, 100%. Yeah. I also, for a long time, confounded those two things. Only within the last 6-7 years, I separated it out. As I was going through one of my exits, actually, I was just like, I totally get it. And even I would tell my accounting people, I'd be like, I know this is not tax thing. I know this is about the true accounting side of things. But I think with a lot of entrepreneurs who are coming up, or maybe who aren't entrepreneurs, and they were just like, hey, I heard about this cannabis thing. I really want to participate. They're like, they don't even know what numbers they should be looking at. Do they know what COGS even are? Right. So I think the education component for consumers is also education on the startups to be like, no, these are the things you need to be looking at. Right.
Yeah.
So I guess for advice, when you see somebody when you have someone coming up to you, what's the first piece of advice? You said knowing your numbers, basically.
Yeah.
Like in more detail, like what would that be? Like,
think about your consumer. How many are there? And it depends on what license you're going after. So if you're thinking about retail, think about how many consumers are in your area. How many are you going to see a day? What's their cart size? It's really like planning from those data points and thinking about your assumptions and making them as clean as possible, because garbage in, garbage out, and I've seen a lot of projections that were like, I took these numbers from California in 2013. It's like, well, we're not in California in 2013. We were in Massachusetts in 2025.
I would love to look at my old pro forma list to be like, oh, wow, I was really far off.
Yeah.
So, that's a really good point, though, because it's like, I think of things like cultivation, which, again, I'm not great at. So I probably don't have the best perspective on this. But I do think about like, man, what does go into cultivation? How many people do you need to have for harvest?
Yeah.
Trimming.
How many pounds per light are you going to grow? And do you want to maximize that? Maybe you don't. Right. Do you want to cut it early or do you want to keep it growing? Like there's a lot of decisions that go into that. And, we joked about, oh, I've got this great grower he grew in Colorado. Well, those are different conditions. Every single facility and every room that person grows in and every seed that they plant is going to grow differently.
Right.
So you need them to have the skills to do it in a variety of different ways, not this one time that they were successful.
Right, exactly.
One success doesn't make you a consultant.
And then also putting all the numbers together to be like, there's the actual cost of growing one plant.
Yes.
Right.
And thinking about labor and labor obviously being a huge factor.
Yep.
And knowing I've seen some retail pro formas that thought that somebody was like, you can't have one person for 12 hours a day. Like,
Exactly.
Are you thinking about breaks? Yeah. Are you thinking like, no, you don't, you need more employees than this?
Yeah. Yeah. And dispensary is it's an interesting model too to us, because we always think to ourselves, because since we see the real data also when we're going into stores, and we're like, and we also see the data from, like Little Earths and Hody and stuff like that. You think about, oh man, they're only seeing like 50 people a day. Like, how long is that store going to exist for, And sometimes you see stores that are doing like over 1,000, and we're like, great store. Let's try to figure out how we can continue to like operate in that store. But I think that would be really good for a person who's coming in, who's starting a new retail, is like, you got to check out what the competitors are doing. Yeah. Because if they're all big, shiny, brand new buildings, doesn't mean they're good. Doesn't mean they're driving traffic. It might only be like 50 people walking through that door. And if you don't know that, and you're like, hey, all right, we're not going to spend as much money on this build out, but when we get there, we're going to be crushing it, because we're going to have so many people coming in, because we're going to be undercutting them or whatever price. And they're going to get like 40 people a day. You know what I mean? It's like there's actual real hard research that needs to happen before you even consider signing that lease. Because that's kind of one of the first steps, is like getting a lease.
I think that's has been a really difficult thing. A lot, as I said, like the regulations have positive and negative effects on the industry. And I think a lot of the regulations have decreased the leverage that a business owner has. I recently saw one of a very beloved small business in my town is unfortunately moving from their long-term location. And it breaks my heart, but I know that they won't be able to exist in that location anymore. And they're trying...
Going up kind of thing, or...
Just, the expensive things. And, they're a natural food store. So that has, that takes a hit when people have less money in their pockets, right?
Yeah.
And it's also, a prime downtown location. The rents have probably gone up. It's expensive. And it's not a place that you can like park and go in. You really need to focus on traffic. And our downtown has diminished in people going downtown.
This was in Northampton.
This was in Northampton, yeah. So they're looking to move to a less expensive location, potentially Holyoke, where there is less competition and maybe lower rents and things like that. Cannabis operators would have a really hard time making those kind of decisions, because it's like the first thing you do is find a location that is zoned, and then you get an HCA, and then you potentially get your license. There's not a lot of leverage and, movability. Like what?
That's why there was a green tax.
You needed to move from here.
I know. We could get kicked out. We're listing in the space. Yeah. We could get kicked out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then we would be like, well, now what do we do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, now I got to go find another facility. I got to negotiate another HCA or whatever. But I think that's why green tax was such an important, what's a big thing, especially in the early days. It was just like, oh, you're cannabis. There's a lot of money in cannabis.
Exactly.
I'm going to double your rent all of a sudden, right? Yeah. So, and then people were like, well, it's the only space I could find, so I'm going to sign this lease.
It's in the right zone. Yeah. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Property owners caught on super quick to that. Yep. And there were a lot of realtors assisting with that, where, people saw a lot of value in, thinking about like the town of Holyoke, which is out near me. There was a lot of really dilapidated old mill buildings. And at that time, there was a really progressive mayor that was all for cannabis. He's like, absolutely, please come in here and build up our buildings, because the worst that will happen is you go under and our buildings are nice now. Exactly. And you paid tax that whole time.
Right.
But there were like, as more and more got snapped up, the building owners just had like inflated values for what they thought their building was
back
worth.
then, I think I remember it was like 2019. I remember somebody telling me, oh, you can just like pay this dude. He'll get you the HCA under some random address.
Were you at Fall River?
No. But no, that was fraud. That was, what do you call it? Bribery? What do you call it?
Yeah, those are all bribery.
But no, it wasn't that. It wasn't bribery. In this case, it was just like, if you want to get into the queue, your application, you had to have a lease. This dude would be like, hey, here's an address you can have, and then just move it afterwards.
Yeah, but it's not that easy to move either.
But the point is, like, you're on the queue, and so you actually get your provisional, and all of a sudden, like, hey, we're moving, and then like you maybe delay it by a couple months. but at least you're not paying rent the entire time because that dude would be like, hey, throw me $5,000.
The whole HCA
It's
debacle is like, in no way should you put that much power on
the landlords.
what are like volunteer city councilors or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it was a huge mess.
So there's a lot of operators in Northampton. How many dispensaries are there now?
I think we had like 12. I think we might be down to like 10. There's still too many. There's not enough.
There's not enough people.
There's not enough people for it. And East Hampton is similar. You know, they have a lot of retail dispensaries.
Okay.
But we have a lot of coffee shops too, and we have a lot of bookstores.
Yeah.
This is just how it is.
Well, what I threw out the number 50, for instance.
Yeah.
What, like, a dispensary specifically, what does it need to do to survive?
Yeah.
Can you survive on 50 customers if your expenses were low enough?
I think you can survive on anything if your expenses are low enough. But I think that the magic number is probably about $5 million annually in sales.
5 million is where you pick it at. So if you're a dispensary right now and you're not doing at least 5 million, maybe talk to Charlotte.
But again, I think it's knowing your break even and factoring in the taxes, which is obviously difficult.
That's the thing. I think people get blindsided by that. And there's definitely a few operators who definitely got in trouble with this one. Not speaking any names again, but they get that IRS bill and you're just like, oh.
You can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You 1,000%
You can't ignore that one. You can't just be like.
You're not ignoring
exactly.
it. They can literally freeze your bank accounts, and it has happened.
I think it has happened.
It has happened while I was on vacation, and a client got their bank accounts frozen, and that was not super fun.
No, that does not sound like fun.
It's also not my problem. I told you, pay your taxes, and like we got them as low as that's how much taxes you owe.
That's just
like,
how much you owe, right? So if you didn't have that side account that was just savings account that you were putting into for taxes. Because that's what we do. We have a separate account where we put away.
Love it, Jason.
Yeah, we just put a little bit of money away for taxes.
Yes.
Just so we know, don't touch that money.
Yes.
It's not for a new project. It's not for distillate. It's for taxes.
Yeah. And every single one of my clients gets a quarterly email reminder that your quarterly estimates are due today. And this is the penalty if you don't pay them. And this is what I think you should pay in.
Yep.
And then some of them make a decision not to because those interest rates are like 8 to 10%. You just said you got an almost 30% rate. So some people aren't paying their estimated taxes. The difference is when you file a tax return, they're going to come out. Like they now know how much you owe them and they're coming for it. So you need to know how much that's going to be and put it aside. And at that point, when you file a return, you can enter into a payment plan. But you should be upfront and enter.
You have to be,
You have to be like, I know I owe you. You can't ignore those notices. And be like,
you can be like, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
It's just just put it in the trash.
Yes.
That raises so many interesting thoughts from my head because I'm just like, you can't ghost IRS like you can ghost me.
Yeah.
Like about paying.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't really have that many AR issues anymore. So we're better off now at least. But like, there are still some lingering ones. But it's funny because it's like, what we say to everybody is just don't ghost us. If you're openly communicating and putting on a payment plan, we're not the IRS, but we still have it's still not leaving a good taste in anybody's mouth because your reputation will precede you.
Yes.
So we don't talk smack about anybody, but if they ask us like, hey, have you worked with this person before? I'd be like, maybe you shouldn't work with that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we won't necessarily go into details of why. But out of that 5 million or so of a dispensary, what they're making, like, how much should they be putting away for taxes at that point? Is it like...
Yeah, so let's say it's about a 50% margin, right?
Yeah.
So if you were at 5 million, that's now at 2.5.
Because your inventory's costs.
Yes, your inventory COGS, let's say it's probably about 50%. Some retailers are doing a really good job of keeping that number lower. It's actually to your benefit for that gross profit to be higher. I know that means more taxes, but that means more money to cover your expenses, right? You're always thinking about it in that like taxes are 30% threshold. It's still better to keep that 70% to yourself. So it's always better to make more on that top line, even if it means more taxes. So let's say it's 50%, so you're at 2.5. And then you have all kinds of expenses. Who knows? It's very dependent on the location, how you're staffed. Like some real small businesses, like the owner is running it and they are not paying themselves very much, where if they had to hire somebody else, it might be at a higher rate. So it really all depends on that makeup. of those fixed expenses that are not related to product. And then the tax rate's 21% federal and 8% mass. So let's round up to 30. So 30% on 2.5. Yeah.
Okay. I can't do that math in my head. It's about a third, right? So like 800, 700, 800,000. So
that's a lot.
Yeah, out of the 5, and you have to pay your staff, and you have to pay for electricity and rent and all this other stuff, right?
That's a lot.
Are there any, like, actually, as you think about COGS, obviously the inventory is a pure COGS play. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else dispensaries could add in as COGS that you like? All right, so
interesting.
Let's all right, so we don't have to answer that directly, but like I was just curious if there's anything that like people are like, no, this is actually like, if it wasn't for this, I couldn't sell the product kind of thing.
So there are some rules about inventory and cost of goods sold. So the IRS has code section 471 that talks about inventories, and they have 2 sections of that. One for a reseller, which is our retailer, and one for a producer, which is our cannabis, our manufacturer, cultivator. Mm-hmm. And some retailers might be doing some production type activities. You might be doing pre-rolls in the back. You might be packaging, repackaging. Doing deli style. Like there are some possible like loopholes there of saying that you're a producer and getting more into your cost of goods sold, because you have more costs going into production of the product. They are going into the cost. So then the reseller section of that code section says the purchase price of product and the costs incurred to purchase product. So that could easily be freight in, but I think that leaves a little bit of interpretation.
Could that be the buyer's salary?
Could it be? Could it be your license because you can't purchase without a license? Could it be like, you know, there are people making that argument, and there's nothing that really says that you can't. I think there's a misconception in the industry. There's a lot of people in my profession that are using this as a marketing tactic. Code section 471C, not an accounting method. All it is a safe harbor that says if you are a small business, we won't argue that your inventory method doesn't properly reflect income, which is the overall threshold that you need to meet, right? Mm-hmm. All that says is that your books and records dictate how you report on the tax basis. So what can my books and records look like? Right. So I think that people are kind of playing that loophole to say, I'm determining my COGS this way.
Right, exactly.
And as long as I kind of check that box and say I'm 471C, you can't argue with it. That's not really true. I don't think you can put anything in there. Right. I think you need to be able to draw a line, but I think it might get you out of what is a pretty restrictive definition.
Got it. Yeah. Now, do you see any of that changing? There's a lot. There's safe.
Let's go Schedule 3.
Well, Schedule 3, of course, is.
Or let's take it off. Beer is not on there.
Right. So, like, I mean, obviously, we could have a lot of theories of what might happen in the future, but like, kind of, what does your gut say right now? Is this something that's a 2026 thing, potentially 2025 thing, even to be like, hey, we're just gonna like switch this switch off?
I don't know. And I'm a big fan of playing for the rules as they stand now, because you don't know. Like right now, there is a tax bill that is up in the air that's gotten past the House and is going to the Senate or whatever. I don't know if those rules are going to happen or not.
Right.
When the IRS says these are the rules now, then I will send out the email blast to my clients and friends. Like, I don't count your chickens before they're hatched, right?
Right.
So do I think that cannabis is going to be descheduled or rescheduled? I think it has to be.
Inevitably.
At some point, it's going to. Look at how far we've come now.
Right.
But do I think that it's going to be in 2025? I don't. Do I think it's going to be in 2026? I don't. I don't know when that's going to happen. People have asked me for
a decade.
Over a decade. When is 280E going away? When is cannabis going to be federally legal? And I think there's 2 ways for 280E to go away. One is it's unconstitutional. I think those arguments have been made and lost. Or 2, cannabis gets rescheduled, and in just a drop to 3 is all we need.
Right.
But
That too, but
as I said, changes in regulation, some positives, some negatives. Like, what does that mean? Are we wishing for something that we don't really want? Do
That's
we want the FDA coming in? Do we want pharma coming in? Like, there's so many conspiracy theories.
because
And
Schedule
be careful
3
what you wish for.
Schedule 3 still means it's a controlled substance,
Still on
but
there.
it's but now it's like under the purview potentially of pharma companies.
Yeah.
So exactly, are we getting something are we hoping for something?
A lot of nutritional supplements are not on there.
Right.
A lot of, again, alcohol, not on the Controlled Substances Act.
Right.
So,
And the sky hasn't fallen.
this guy has no fallen.
Right.
Right.
So we're all good. Everybody's great. Still not, I don't think there's a single ever cannabis death still.
And what if they implement a federal sales tax? Again, 20% sales tax, worse than 280E. That is worse. That is on sales. That's no deductions, guys.
exactly.
That is worse.
Actually, speaking of that, if 280E went away, because I don't think I've ever ran through this in my head, you're talking about, 30% on 2.5 million if after the COGS. So it's still 30% tax, but like how much more do you deduct at that point?
All of it. It depends on what the company's fixed costs are, or non-COGS costs.
Well, I think
Those would be massive. I mean, a company could be generating a net loss. That is the worst possible scenario. They could be in negative and still be paying $850,000 in tax.
Yeah.
You could be at a negative money and still
money.
be ready to pony up because, and similarly, the sales tax, it's not based on what you have left over. It's based on your sales.
That's right.
No deductions.
Top line.
Top line. Right out of that customer's pocket.
Wow. This is absolutely fascinating. So as we close to wrap, are there any particular, I think, things that are coming up that you're kind of more passionate about right now that you want to get out there and discuss?
I do think that there's some bills that I'm excited about. I'm excited about the medical bills. I think that there's still some room for that. I'm also, we talked about medical. My other wish list is I think that we have some ills in the marketplace and in the innovation of products because of the regulations, one being the dosage cap. And also the fact that it is an adult use TAC hunting consumer that everyone's kind of pandering to. But there's other states that have amazing medical products, bath bombs, and a lot of feminine products that just are not on the market in Massachusetts because we're looking for an adult use bro customer that we have perceived as who is our buyer.
Well, there's that perception of like, how many am I going to sell of these? Yeah. So the buyers are just like, well, if I'm going to sell like one a week.
Like topicals, even the medical dispensary that I went to had one topical product. That's it. And it was like a lotion or something.
Yeah.
Like there's so much more out there. There's so much more innovation. And I think everybody's stuck on seltzers and gummies. Like, what else is out there, guys?
Yeah, I know.
I didn't come here to like blow smoke up your butt, but like you have a very different product, and like you've found that innovation and found that niche that I think everybody should be striving for. Stop making, your cranberry flavored gummy and thinking that that's innovation. Like, what else is out there? How else can we consume? Like, think about that.
Well, we worked really hard on it.
Yeah.
And we also have a ton of R&D.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Developing more and more all the time. But I think it's more like, it was actually kind of a shock that, you started to see chocolates disappear even.
Yeah.
But I think of chocolates as like one of the OG things you would with cannabis. Gummies just took over everything.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, outside of Betty's Eddies, which is like that taffy chew. Yeah. Other than that, if you think if you look at the top 7, or actually probably even top 15 in sales, every single one's a gummy. Yeah. So where is all the innovation?
There are options. Think of going to the candy aisle. And I know we're a little bit restricted. Like up in Maine, you can get like a pixie stick.
Yeah, I bet.
They don't have that worry about like this is catering to children. Right. And Massachusetts is pretty strict about that. But there's so many more options. Come on.
I know. There's so much more innovation to have. I think again, is it consumer education? Is it the traffic at the store? Is it the buyers who are weary about taking in a niche product? Yeah. Like it's such a heavy question because I love innovation. I'm always going to be creating new things all the time. I always tell people we have like 50 or 60 products in the back catalog right now that we just can't release really because yeah, you might buy a couple of them, but it's like, it's not big enough for the buyers to get excited about. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on.
This is really great, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing for the industry, and I hope that we have a real positive, change in the future, and I'll be here for the long haul.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much.
Thanks.